the predator-filled darkness of Caddo Lake, the water holds its breath. A small aluminum boat glides across the surface, a fragile shape against the deep. Then, a sound that doesn't belong, a violent screech of metal. The impact is like a car crash, a massive jolt from below as a 20-foot mass erupts from the depths. The boat is catapulted, flipping instantly, throwing a family into the black water. One moment, a peaceful trip. The next, a desperate struggle for the surface. And in the shocked silence that follows the splash, a clear, terrifying realization begins to form. This wasn't an accident. It was an attack. But to understand the violence of that moment, to understand that deliberate, focused aggression, you have to understand the place it came from. You have to go back to the beginning of that day. It was March of 1969. Thomas Mloud and his wife were looking for what Caddo Lake, Texas, promised to so many. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like the rest of the world has slipped below the horizon and forgotten you. Caddo Lake helps that feeling along. It isn't a lake in the way most people picture one. It's a flooded forest, an endless black maze of ancient cypress trunks rising straight out of the dark water, their knees and roots hidden just below the surface. The branches sagged under curtains of Spanish moss that hung low, like gray veils, as if the trees were trying to cover their own faces. It's beautiful, but it's an oppressive kind of beauty. The air sits heavy. Sounds don't carry far. Once you leave the boat ramp, and the last roofs drop behind the trees, the modern world feels like it has been quietly shut behind a door. They motored deeper into that maze, the little aluminum boat nudging a path between the cypress columns. The engine's growl bounced off the trunks and died quickly, swallowed by the timber and the water. Even the usual lake noises, distant voices, radios, traffic, never reached them here. Only the hum of insects at the edge of hearing, and the soft slap of their wake against the trees. Eventually, they found a spot the locals called Buzzard Bay. No houses, no other boats, just cypress, moss, and flat. Dark water stretching in every direction. Thomas cut the engine. The sudden absence of noise felt almost physical, like someone had taken their fingers out of your ears. The boat rocked once, then settled. He tied the bow line around the thick, gnarled base of a cypress tree, the rope damp and rough in his hands. For a long while there was only the sun on their backs, the faint creak of the hull, and the simple hope of a good day's fishing. Somewhere, out in the maze, a bird called once, and fell silent. That was when they noticed it. Far off between the trunks, maybe 100 yards away, something lay on the surface of the water. Long. Dark. At first it was just a shape interrupting the reflections, easy to mistake for the half-sunk hull of an old boat, the kind that sometimes drifted loose from their moorings or got abandoned in storms. It was big. Thomas would later estimate around 20 feet. A black bar just barely breaking the surface. It didn't ripple or thrash. It simply rested there, low and heavy in the water. They watched it for a few quiet minutes. Curiosity mild, nothing more. Out on the lake, the current moved lazily through the trees, carrying leaves and bits of floating debris in a slow, predictable direction. This thing didn't go with them. The dark shape began to slide the other way, pushing against the gentle flow instead of drifting with it. The water folded around its front edge, a subtle bow wave rolling out from something solid underneath. That was the moment their curiosity shifted. Confusion first, as the brain tries to find a familiar label. A log caught on something, a snag surfacing, maybe a loose dock section. But the movement was too smooth, too controlled. Whatever it was moving under its own power. It glided a short distance, then came to a stop again. The surface around it went almost unnaturally calm, like the water itself held its breath. For a long, thin moment, it just stayed there. And then it turned. You can tell when something in the water is drifting, and when it's choosing a direction. This was a choice. The long, dark mass rotated until its narrow end was pointed straight at their small boat. There was no wiggle, no hesitation. The languid glide vanished. It surged forward. The black water in front of it heaved into a wake, rolling toward them through the cypress knees. The sound reached them a second later, a low, rushing hiss as the surface broke and closed again. The distance between them started to vanish in a way their eyes could track, too fast now to feel like an illusion. On the boat, everything that had been loose and relaxed only moments earlier tightened at once. Thomas went for the rope. His fingers dug at the knot he'd tied so confidently to the cypress base. The damp line had cinched down hard. Each pull only bit it tighter into the bark and into his palms. The boat, tied squarely to the tree, rocked in place but would not drift. His wife's voice cut across the water, sharp, ragged, saying his name, telling him to start the motor. The words blurred together, more tone than language. He gave up on the rope and lunged for the engine. The pull cord jerked in his hands. The small outboard coughed, caught for a heartbeat, and died. He yanked it again. Nothing. Again. The only answer was a thin, choking sputter. The approaching wake slid between the trunks now, dark shape just beneath it, like a torpedo locked onto a target. They had nowhere to go. The cypress tree held them in place, turning their little aluminum boat into a fixed point in the path of whatever was coming. In those last seconds, as the bulk of it rose alongside them, Thomas saw the skin. Not smooth, not the pale softness of any manatee. It was dark and brutally rough, built up in ridges and plates like old armor, or thick, ancient scales that had known pressure and time. The impact came without warning. Metal screamed, a high, tearing crunch as the hull buckled under the blow. The side of the boat lurched up and away from the water, throwing both of them sideways. Cold hit him like a fist. One instant he was in air. The next, the lake closed over his head, icy and black and full of silt. The world narrowed to bubbles and pressure. Murky water forced its way into his nose and mouth, tasting of mud and gasoline. For a moment, he didn't know which way was up, just a spinning blur of gray light and green-brown shadow. When his head finally broke the surface, he came up gasping, his chest burning. The boat was no longer beneath his feet. It was above him, overturned, its silver belly now a dull, dripping ceiling. He called for his wife. Somewhere to his left, she answered, her voice small against the empty cypress corridor. They paddled toward one another, grabbing at floating tackle and bits of broken gear, until their hands met and locked around the same edge of the overturned hull. They clung there, fingers numb on the cold metal. The lake that had looked so still from above now rolled in slow, indifferent swells against their backs. Neither of them knew where the thing had gone. It could have been inches under their feet, or already vanished back into the maze. Time stretched. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a violent noise, the echo of impact slowly draining away. All they had now was their own breathing and the soft drip of water off the capsized boat. Eventually, another sound reached them, the distant thrum of an engine, small but growing. A local fisherman, drawn by the crash and the sudden emptiness where their boat had been, steered around the cypress trunks until he found them. Two figures in life jackets, half submerged, clinging to bright aluminum in a field of black water. He hauled them over the side of his own boat. The metal was cold under Thomas's palms as he lay there, coughing, while the rescuer hooked a line to the overturned hull. As they started back toward the landing, the forest slid past in slow motion. The place that, an hour earlier, had promised quiet, now felt watchful. The image would not leave him, that rough, armored skin turning deliberately in their direction. In the days that followed, sleep didn't come easily. Every time Thomas closed his eyes, he felt the knot hardening in his hands, heard the motor fail, saw the dark shape accelerating through the trees. He was certain of one thing: he had not imagined it. Haunted by the attack, and by the quiet way the lake seemed to close over the evidence, he decided to report what had happened. Not to friends, not as a story to be laughed off, but to someone who could put it on record. He called the Shreveport Times. The paper had been covering odd things on Caddo Lake that month, and the receptionist put him through to the reporter handling them, a man named J.L. Wilson. Thomas expected the chuckle, the polite dismissal, the kind of pause that says, "Are you sure you weren't just seeing things?" Instead, Wilson let him talk. No interruptions, no jokes, just the scratch of a pen somewhere on the other end of the line. When Thomas finished describing the impact, the capsized boat, the texture of that skin, there was a brief silence. Then Wilson said calmly that he wasn't the first. The words landed in two directions at once. Part of Thomas felt a thin, shaky relief that he wasn't losing his mind, that other people had seen it too, that the nightmare had edges that matched someone else's. But underneath that flicker of comfort was something colder. If he was just the latest, it meant the thing in the water was real enough to keep returning, real enough to have a history. Wilson explained that for weeks, locals had been coming forward with nearly identical accounts. Fishermen, boaters, people who knew the lake. They all described a large, aggressive creature moving through the cypress maze of Caddo Lake, sometimes trailing boats, sometimes ramming them. The Shreveport Times had already been documenting the sightings for a month. Wilson had collected reports of the Mlouds capsizing, along with dozens of other encounters, and given the creature a name that stuck in the headlines: Cypress Cindy. Officials floated an explanation that it was just a manatee, a gentle giant far from home. On paper, it was a tidy answer. None of the witnesses accepted it. Not the men whose boats had been hit. Not the people who'd seen that rough, plated skin and felt its deliberate force slam into aluminum. Thomas included. Whatever lived out there among the cypress knees did not move like a confused herbivore. An attack like this, sudden, physical, territorial, is something our minds almost know how to file. It fits a pattern as old as campfires and cave mouths. An animal, a monster, defending its home. Being hunted is a fear wired deep into us. But what happens when the thing in the dark isn't just driving you away? It's watching you? What happens when the terror doesn't come from the water, but from the woods? And what happens when the creature you see knows you can see it? The water isn't the only place where the ancient and the modern collide. Sometimes, the silent forests that border our own highways hold something that watches us back. What you are about to hear happened in one of those places. It was October 1994, in a narrow band of West Virginia woods, not far from Interstate 77. The man was Mark, a hunter who had spent years in those trees. He knew where the old logging road veered off, where the low creek cut a dark line through the undergrowth, and which sapling you could use as a landmark when the light was still barely there. He was in his tree stand well before sunrise, boots settled on the cold metal grate, breath lifting in faint clouds. Below him, the forest was a dark, unbroken shape. He checked the familiar points out of habit. The game trail that crossed 30 yards to his left, the shallow dip in the ground where deer liked to bed, the pale gap in the trees where, on a clear morning, the sky would brighten first. It was the sort of stillness he trusted. No engines, no voices, Just the distant hush of the highway, like a river you could almost forget was there. The quiet held for a long time. Then the forest broke pattern. Cutting through the stillness came a sound that did not fit the usual dawn script. It was not the light, scattered tread of a deer, not the skitter of something small in the leaves. It was a clear, rhythmic impact. Heel, then wait. Heel, then wait. A two-legged cadence, heavy enough that he could feel it more than hear it at first. A faint vibration in the wood beneath him. Someone was walking through the woods below his stand. His first reaction wasn't fear, it was irritation. In his mind's eye, he saw another hunter, late and careless, angling straight into his line of fire and warning every animal within earshot. He stayed still, lips pressed together, listening to the approach and silently counting the steps. If he could catch even a silhouette, he'd know who had just ruined his morning. The footsteps drew closer, then stopped. No branches cracking, no rustle of clothing, just absence. The forest seemed to hold its breath again. Slowly, the black of night began to thin. A washed-out gray seeped between the trunks. Mark's eyes adjusted, doing what they had done hundreds of times before. He swept the ground beneath him, tracing the familiar shapes. The lean of one oak, the angled trunk of a lightning-scarred pine, the contours of rock and brush he could have sketched from memory. And then he saw it. About 60 yards away, near a tree he knew as a reference point, there was a dark mass low to the ground. It was roughly the height of a stump, maybe 4 feet, covered in something that looked like matted hair. In the dim light, it sat perfectly still, exactly where Mark knew there was no stump, no pile of cut wood, nothing that should break the clean line of the forest floor. His attention narrowed. Without thinking, he leaned forward slightly in the stand, fingers tightening on the cold rail. The rest of the woods faded to background. Whatever that shape was, it didn't belong to his internal map of this place. Every time he looked at that patch of ground in past seasons, it had been empty leaves and dirt. Now there was a presence occupying that space, dense and wrong. A faint chill lifted the hair on his arms. He tried to force a reasonable picture onto it. Maybe a blown-down branch he hadn't noticed. A bear tucked in against the base of the tree, its back turned to him. The shape answered him on its own. The stump stood up. It didn't jerk or scramble like an animal pushed from cover. It rose in one controlled, unhurried movement, as if unwinding from itself. 4 feet became 5, then 6, then more. The mass elongated into a towering, upright figure, broad across the shoulders, thick through the chest and arms. In the soft, early light, the outline was unmistakable. A humanoid frame, covered in dark, rough hair, easily 8 feet tall. Mark had seen bears rear up before. Their proportions are different. The slope of the back, the narrowness of the legs, the way the head sits forward. This thing's balance, the length of its arms, the straight line of its spine. Everything in his experience told him it was no bear. For a heartbeat, his body went ahead of his thoughts. His pulse kicked hard in his throat. Part of him braced for the 2 outcomes he understood. It would bolt, crashing through the underbrush, or it would turn toward him and charge. It did neither. The figure took several slow, deliberate steps to a large oak. There was nothing animal-like in the way it moved. No quick, nervous head turns, no scenting of the air. It stopped at the tree and leaned against it, as if it had done this 100 times before. One long arm came up and rested along the trunk in a casual, almost relaxed pose. Then, it simply stood there. Mark followed the line of its head. Through a narrow gap in the trees, he could see in the far distance the faint movement of headlights slipping along Interstate 77. That was where its attention seemed fixed. Not on the ground for food, not on the branches for threats, but out toward the thin line where the forest ended and the man-made world flowed by. Later, when he tried to explain it, he said, "It wasn't looking for food. It wasn't sniffling the air. It was leaning against the tree with one arm, almost casually, and was looking toward the highway. It was observing." That was what lodged in him. The posture, the stillness, the way it gave the highway the kind of quiet focus a person might give a campfire or a television screen. Mark realized that in this moment, he was not watching an animal work through instinct. He was watching something that appeared to be simply taking in the sight of cars. Time stretched. He couldn't have said whether 30 seconds or several minutes passed. The creature did not pace or fidget. It just watched. In the stand, Mark found himself holding his breath without meaning to, afraid that any movement, any sound from him, would break whatever thin barrier lay between them. Then, with a slow precision that felt almost deliberate, the figure turned its head. From 60 yards away, through the pale haze of morning, it looked directly at him. There was no flinch, no startle at discovering a human shape in the tree. Its gaze settled on him, the way you might notice another passenger on a train, acknowledging, aware, but not alarmed. Even at that distance, he felt pinned in place by the simple fact of being seen. His body waited for threat. A bared set of teeth, a step in his direction, some sign of aggression. None came. What reached him instead was a strange, calm recognition, as if both of them were now included in the same quiet equation. After a few long seconds, it turned away. It pushed off from the oak with that resting arm, took a handful of long, unhurried strides, and slipped between the trees. There was no dramatic crash, no obvious trail of motion. One moment it occupied space. The next, the forest had closed around it, and it was gone. Mark stayed in the tree stand. The urge to climb down and run was immediate and strong, but another part of him, the part trained over years not to stumble in the dark, kept him there. He listened. The woods slowly remembered themselves. A bird called once. A small animal moved through the leaves somewhere to his right. The distant hum of the interstate returned to its old, dull presence. Even when the light had fully taken hold, and the shapes below were clear, the spot where the creature had stood looked ordinary again. An oak, a patch of disturbed leaves, empty air. Eventually, he climbed down, boots landing in the same earth that had held those heavy steps. Walking out along the familiar path, every tree seemed changed by the knowledge of what had just leaned against one of them. The woods he had trusted for years no longer felt like a backdrop. They felt occupied. He did not tell a crowd. He went to the one person in his life who both knew these woods and would not take his word easily: his father-in-law. The man had hunted that region longer than Mark had been alive. He had heard every campfire story and shot most of them down. When Mark described what he had seen, he could hear the skepticism in the pauses on the other end of the conversation. The careful, measured questions. The quiet suggestion that it might have been a bear or a trick of the light, or another hunter in heavy gear. But beneath that doubt was something else, a willingness to go and look. So they went back together, in daylight, with two sets of eyes on the ground. The sight was easier to read. They stood at the base of the tree stand and traced the path Mark had watched with his eyes earlier that morning, moving toward the oak where the figure had leaned. The first footprint stopped them both. In the soft earth, angled slightly as if mid-stride, was an impression far larger than either of their boots. The toes were splayed, the heel deep. Measuring it against his own foot, Mark estimated it at somewhere between 18 and 20 inches long. The step behind it was the same, and another. Each print pressed cleanly into the soil, the weight of whatever had made it undeniable. His father-in-law crouched down, hands on his knees, and studied the track in silence. This was not the reaction of a man indulging a wild story. It was the focused, practical attention he usually gave to sign he could explain. Deer, bear, human. Only now there was an absence of ready labels. At the oak, they found more. About where the creature's arm would have rested, the bark was scuffed, a fresh abrasion in the rough surface. Caught in that roughness was a small clump of coarse, black hair. Not the soft underfur of a deer, not the short, familiar strands of a human. It was thicker, more rigid, each piece catching the light differently when they turned it between their fingers. Standing there with the footprints behind them and the hair in front of them, the conversation between belief and skepticism shifted. The father-in-law still didn't have a name for what Mark had seen, but his doubt no longer came with easy answers. The evidence under their boots and in their hands demanded more than a dismissive shrug. Tracks that size, hair that doesn't match any animal they knew, and a memory of something watching the highway. Physical traces like that are exactly the kind of thing that, every so often, leave the woods and end up in official folders. Declassified files from the FBI, released in 2019, show that this wasn't a one-off curiosity. In the 1970s, the Bureau received and analyzed multiple samples of suspected Bigfoot hair and tissue, submitted alongside casts of enormous footprints, some reportedly up to 24 inches long, from eyewitness reports across the country. Those documents don't read like a confirmation of any creature. They read like what they are. Federal labs taking unusual evidence seriously enough to catalog it, test it, and issue formal results. The point isn't that the FBI proved Mark's watcher existed. It's that the kind of hair and tracks he found have, more than once, been considered worth that level of scrutiny. For someone like Mark, who had always treated these woods as known, mapped territory, that matters. His fear that morning wasn't just a private nightmare. It belonged to a small, uncomfortable pattern. Hunters seeing something that shouldn't be there, finding something physical left behind, and handing it over to people whose job is to doubt everything and test anyway. The figure in the trees near Interstate 77 fits that pattern. A terrestrial presence that appears briefly at the edge of our world, leaves prints and hair behind, and then recedes back into the trees. A watcher, not a mindless beast. A mystery that, while terrifying, can still be filed under a category we halfway recognize. But even that kind of mystery has limits we can live with. We can tell ourselves it's some undiscovered primate, some relic population avoiding us, something with bones and muscles, however strange. What happens when the encounter won't even give you that? When the thing you see doesn't just behave wrong, but moves in ways no body should move, looks like it was assembled from the wrong parts, and refuses every category, man, animal, or something in between. The watcher in the woods still lets us pretend there are rules. The next encounter does not. Those, at least, we can almost understand. Things of flesh and bone that stay at the edge of the clearing. But sometimes, the encounter refuses every category we have. Sometimes, it steps out of the dark and onto the road, into the thin strip of light we tell ourselves is safe. This is what appears in the records for February 1991. Fairborn, Ohio. A 2-lane stretch running along the boundary of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. A man is driving home at night. The sky is overcast. His world has narrowed to the steady hiss of tires, the low hum of the engine, and the way his headlights carve a brief tunnel through the empty road. Then, in that tunnel of light, something is standing at the edge of the asphalt. A tall figure, motionless at the side of the road. His first thought stays close to ordinary life. A person. Someone walking where they shouldn't be. Maybe a soldier from the base, a local in a heavy coat, even a hitchhiker with impossibly bad timing. For a moment he wonders if it's a prank, someone waiting for a reaction. The mind reaches for small, practical shelves to set the image on so the rest of the night can stay ordinary. He draws closer. The figure doesn't step back. It doesn't even turn its head. It simply angles away from the shoulder and begins to cross in front of him. He hits the brake hard enough to feel the belt bite across his chest. But what freezes him isn't the risk of impact. It's the way the figure moves. It doesn't walk. The legs do not bend. The body just slides across the pavement in one smooth, unbroken motion, like something drifting beneath a layer of water, while the surface stays perfectly calm. Again, the mind tries to press this back into something familiar. Maybe there are wheels under those feet. Roller skates, a strange prank on a cold night. The thought is thin and frayed, but it is something, and for a few seconds, it holds. Then the figure stops, dead center in his lane, a few feet from the hood, caught in the full, unforgiving glare of his headlights. In that light, every patchwork explanation he has been building comes apart. This is not a person in a suit. The thing in front of him is about 7 feet tall. Its skin is a pale, unhealthy gray, with a sheen that makes him think of wet leather stretched too tight. Above the narrow shoulders, the head rises into a giant, bulbous, pear-shaped skull that swells wide and then narrows down to a small, pointed chin, as if the skull has grown in a direction nothing human ever has. And the eyes. The file makes a point of his wording here. He calls them massive, slanted, black, so large they seem to wrap around the sides of its head. They shine in his headlights, not like glass or plastic, but as if the surface is wet. He says they looked real, alive. He should be doing something, reversing, turning the wheel, reaching for the door lock. But his hands stay welded to the rim of the steering wheel. His foot hangs uselessly above the pedal. His breathing stutters back in short, shallow pulls that fog a small patch of windshield between them. The engine idles. Outside, the gray figure doesn't move. It doesn't bare teeth or raise a hand. It just looks at him, those black eyes reflecting a tiny, trembling shape that might be his own face. Little thoughts skid through the silence and vanish before they form. If it's a mask, why do the eyes follow so smoothly? If it's a joke, who would stand this still, this close to a moving car? Nothing in front of him matches any memory behind him. For a suspended moment, the world narrows to the weight of his fingers on the wheel, and the awareness that something impossible is now occupying the same stretch of air he is. Then, as abruptly as it stopped, the figure resumes its motion. No gathering of muscles, no bend of the knee. It simply slides, the way it did before, crossing the remaining width of the lane in that same frictionless glide. In a few seconds, it has left the beam of the headlights and is swallowed by the darkness at the far side of the road. The night closes behind it, as if nothing has passed through. He doesn't watch to see where it goes. The spell breaks not with a scream or a crash, but with a single, blunt instinct. Leave. He accelerates away from the spot, more by reflex than decision. Later, when he tries to reconstruct the drive home, there is almost nothing. He remembers the sensation of motion without distance, the white dashes of paint smearing into a continuous line, the sense that the car is moving through thick water instead of air. Between the encounter and his driveway, the record goes dark. The official report he files later doesn't linger on what happens in those first hours. The archives remain silent on this point. They don't tell us how long he sat in the parked car with the engine off, or how many times he checked his locks that night. What they do preserve is one clear detail. He feels an overwhelming need to put distance between himself and that stretch of road. But distance doesn't help. An image like that doesn't stay where it was left. It follows into the quiet, into the parts of the night when most people forget how thin the walls of a house really are. At some point, the fear shifts into something else, a pressure to decide what to do with what he has seen. Say nothing, and the memory stays a private fracture in reality that he has to carry alone. Speak, and he risks becoming a story other people roll their eyes at. Anyone who has ever hesitated before telling a strange story knows that balance. The pull between needing to be believed and wanting to be safe. In his case, the need for an anchor wins. He chooses a place where reports like his are meant to be collected, examined, taken seriously. He files a formal report with the Mutual UFO Network. MUFON. Height. Approximate location near Wright-Patterson. The texture of the skin. The shape of the skull. The way it moved. Bit by bit, he forces the encounter into sentences, each one pinning a moment of that night, so it doesn't drift any further from what he remembers. When the report is processed, his experience becomes more than a memory. It becomes a number. Case 188. On one level, that sounds clinical, almost dismissive. One entry among thousands. But for him, it means the thing that stood in his headlights now exists in an archive outside his own mind. It can be found. It can be compared. Through that official channel, he discovers he is not alone. Investigators tell him that his description, the unusual height, the wet gray skin like leather, the pear-shaped head, the gliding movement with unbending legs, matches other reports from the same area around Fairborn and Wright-Patterson. Different nights, different witnesses, the same impossible silhouette moving through the beam of a car, the same huge, dark, shining eyes noted again and again. Whatever stepped onto the road in front of him has been seen before. There is a strange kind of comfort in that, and a deeper kind of dread. Comfort, because if others have seen it, then maybe he isn't losing his mind. Dread, because if the pattern is real, then whatever he met that night is not a one-time accident. It belongs to the place. It moves through these roads and fields, as if they are part of its routine. That realization might have been the end of it, a cluster of eerie local stories loosely tied together. But the geography of his encounter carries an extra weight. That quiet stretch of road runs beside Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and for nearly 2 decades, this base was home to a very specific project. From 1952 to 1969, Wright-Patterson was the headquarters for Project Blue Book, the United States Air Force's own long-running study of unidentified flying objects. Over those years, the project logged more than 12,000 sightings from across the country. Many of the reports that mention tall, gray-skinned humanoids with large, dark eyes and an unnatural way of moving come from this same region of Ohio, in the shadow of the same base. When those Air Force files later become public, patterns emerge. In among the technical language and coordinates are descriptions that line up almost exactly with his own. The height, the gray skin like wet leather, the swollen pear-shaped skull, the overlarge dark eyes, the gliding movement instead of a walk. His solitary encounter on a winter road now sits on top of a stack of cases the Air Force once stamped and cataloged. At that point, his story is no longer just a nightmare retold to friends. It is one link in a chain that runs through Project Blue Book case numbers, MUFON files, and the memories of people who, on different nights, felt the world thin out in front of them for a few seconds, and then close again. Most of them never meet. They share only a pattern on paper, and the quiet knowledge that somewhere, someone else has seen the same impossible shape, and then had to keep living anyway. A scattered community of witnesses bound by a single, uncomfortable question. What does a person do with a life that now includes something the world insists cannot exist? A fisherman on the water, a hunter in the deep woods, a driver on a road they'd traveled 1,000 times. 3 lives, separated by geography and circumstance, yet bound together by a single, irreversible moment, when the ordinary surface of their world suddenly thinned. The true common thread isn't the shape of the creature, or the landscape where it appeared. It's the profound, chilling silence that follows. In that silence, it feels as if the water, the trees, even the road itself are holding their breath. It's the pain of being the solitary witness to an event that shatters the known world, leaving you alone with the pieces. It's the internal echo, the question that plays on a loop in the quiet hours. I know it doesn't make sense, but I can't stop replaying it. If you've ever carried a memory you can't quite explain, you already know the feel of that loop. This is the burden of the witness, to carry a truth that has no place to land in the shared reality of others. And the weight of that truth becomes heavier when we examine the details held in the archives, because they point to intent rather than accident. These were not mindless beasts lashing out by instinct. At least, that is how the human record reads. The report from Caddo Lake is specific. What happened to that boat wasn't an accident. The file uses one word: attack. A term reserved for an action chosen, not a random collision. The watcher in the West Virginia forest wasn't foraging or passing through. The witness statement is firm on this point. It was observing, describing not just movement, but focused attention. And the entity on that dark Ohio road did not stumble into the headlights. It moved with a silent, unnerving purpose. It was as if the road, the night, and the human passing through were all minor details in its own unknowable journey. These accounts, preserved in newspaper clippings, declassified files, and witness testimonies, are more than campfire stories. They are documented fragments of a pattern. Across water, forest, and road, each case turns on the same three elements: one person alone, a place they thought they understood, and a presence that behaves with its own unsettling purpose. The pattern matters because it suggests a consistent way this unknown intelligence chooses to appear. Briefly, selectively, and only when the witness has no one to share the moment with in real time. Viewed together, the fragments point toward encounters with a form of intelligence that operates just beyond the thin veil of our understanding. Close enough to brush against our world, distant enough to remain unproven. It leaves behind just enough proof to make the memory impossible to discard, but never enough to settle what exactly was looking back. For some, that memory clings to a tree line or an empty stretch of asphalt. For others, it waits just below the surface of black water, where the ocean feels like it might still be hiding something that watched us first. In that sense, these stories teach us less about monsters and more about the quiet, asymmetrical ways an unknown intelligence can touch a single human life and then recede, leaving only questions. They leave behind only the solitary witness and the cold, unblinking memory of what they saw in the dark. And I don't think those memories are finished appearing. If you've ever stood at the edge of the woods, or a late-night road, or a stretch of dark water, and felt that same wordless pressure of being observed, you're not alone in it. I'll be here in the archives, and in the undertow of these stories with you, listening to what the water, and whatever watches from within it, will or won't allow us to know. For a long time, the story seems to end in the space of a memory. But the archives, the news clippings and official files, whisper something else. On paper, they look finished, yet their weight still lives in the people who lived them. Those witnesses are not alone. A story like that never ends. It lingers as a memory that shifted their world and refuses to fade. If you carry something similar, you are part of a silent current in a vast world where not everything that moves in the dark has been cataloged. At some point, their story stops feeling distant. The isolation they describe is not so different from the quiet you might have been keeping to yourself. Have you ever had a moment on a dark road or a quiet body of water that you still can't explain? The kind that returns without warning, a chill along your spine, or a shape you almost see at the edge of the dark. Here, in this stretch of dark water, we let those moments surface, not to solve them, but to acknowledge them. In the comments below, others have set down their encounters, each one a signal in the deep that says, "You are not alone." If you have stood at that edge, I invite you to share your experience below, not into a void, but into a quiet circle of witnesses. And whether you speak or simply listen, we will be here, keeping watch and listening to the whispers from the deep together.